Wildlife conservation is a major component of the Horizon 2 initiative. On this episode of Prairie Prophets, we explore how proper landscape management allows wild turkeys to thrive today where only a short time ago they were extirpated. We go turkey hunting with Steve Mowry, a North Missouri landowner and dedicated conservationist, to learn how habitat work on his farm has led to more turkeys calling it home. We also visit with Brent Vandeloecht from the Department of Conservation, John Burk from the National Wild Turkey Federation, and Frank Oberle, the Godfather of North Missouri Prairie. Out here in the heartland, where agriculture drives rural economy, we are on the path to a future that not only produces food, but also renewable energy, ecological services, and improved wildlife habitats. I'm on a journey to tell the stories of Horizon 2, a climate-smart future for corn, soybean, livestock, and renewable natural gas production. I'm Brandon Butler, and this is Prairie Prophets. Missouri is a hunting and fishing state. We are blessed with an abundance of natural resources. Perhaps nothing better defines Missouri, though, than the wild turkey. In the 1920s, the population dipped to an estimated 2,000 birds. Those were hiding out in the deepest, gnarliest hollers of the Ozarks. Today, wild turkeys thrive statewide. Brent, tell us what the Department of Conservation Community and Private Land Unit does for individual landowners.
Yeah, so our agency in our private lands unit, I mean, there's about 100 of us in the agency, and what we do is we work one-on-one with communities and private landowners to help them manage their property for fish, forests, and wildlife. And you know, when we go out there, our main concern is to find out, hey, what are the landowners' objectives? What do you want to accomplish? And how can we, work with you to meet your goals?
There's a lot to learn in becoming a landowner. I know that from personal experience. You buy this piece of land, you have a dream of having wildlife on it, but you don't know where to get started. How do people even get a hold of you to put the plan together? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so after you buy your place, I guess probably the best thing to do is just go to the MDC website, mdc.mo.gov. There's a contact and engage page. But I'll tell you, most of our private lands folks work out of a USDA office with NRCS and FSA staff, SWCD. So our staff are there, but they typically have 2 or 3 county assignments. So they may not be physically in your county, but they can get in touch with our folks.
Brent, in your 20 years with the Department of Conservation, how have you seen trends change? Are more people coming to the department looking to restore natives, looking to do conservation practices?
Yeah, I would say so. And it ebbs and flows, right? I mean, 20 years ago, it was a little slower. We just had a few private land staff, and we have grown over time. But what happens is maybe there's a big interest in bobwhite quail. In the last 4 or 5 years, I think you mentioned earlier, the monarch butterfly is huge. Everybody's interested in that. Maybe the farmer's not, but his wife is. So, we get more and more calls for that all the time. There's more and more emphasis on it. Seems to be more and more funding and attention paid to critical things like these. And, those insects are the base of the food chain. So they're critical for all birds, whether it's wild turkey, ground nesting birds. If we don't have them, we may not have anything. So but the demand is definitely there, and there's more interest in it than ever, coming from places you wouldn't necessarily expect. A lot of groups, ag groups, conservation groups, conservation agencies, other NGOs all coming together to work together on monarchs and pollinators. It's just tremendous. So we're building bridges right now that I think we're heading places we've never been before. I mean, the sky's the limit.
Even though Missouri has a strong wild turkey population, there has been concern over recent years about a population decline. There are multiple theories as to why, but most agree habitat loss is a contributing factor. John, what is the National Wild Turkey Federation?
Well, we're a conservation organization, and our mission is the conservation of wild turkey and the preservation of the hunting heritage. So what I really like about the organization is that we do kind of serve both halves of that mission. Almost all the NGOs do great conservation work, but as do we. But we are also focused on the users of those resources as well, and that, supporting that hunting tradition.
What's your role with the organization?
I'm the district biologist for the National Wild Turkey Federation. I serve Missouri, Iowa, and Illinois, and what I do is work with partner groups to take the dollars that we raise at the fundraising banquets across the states and turn every one of those dollars into 5 to make our footprint be bigger and deeper.
To me, the wild turkey really represents conservation. Everybody comes to this for different reasons, but when I was growing up in Northwest Indiana, there were no wild turkeys. And I'm not that old yet. I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. So I can remember a time when this species wasn't even available. I saw my first wild turkeys in the late 1990s when the restoration began in that area. And I was able to harvest my first from that woodlot 30 years later, just this year. So that whole cycle just means the world to me. But I know it comes down to habitat and having the right habitat on the ground. And grasslands, native grasses, are a big part of that. How do you integrate native grasses into turkey habitat, and why is it so important?
Native grasses are critical to poult survival, and poult survival is what we found is the reason why the turkeys are in decline. They are not surviving like they used to. All of the other statistics that we looked at, adult survival of hens and gobblers, even nesting rates and hatching rates are within the normal, within the realm of normalcy compared to the stuff we did in the 80s. Poult survival is significantly lower, and that's the reason for the decline. Well, poult survival is determined by habitat quality, and native grasslands are a pretty good example of what that is. Native grasses are bunch-type grasses, whereas coastal Bermuda and fescue are sod-forming grasses, and those basically create an impenetrable wall to poults. Poults don't thermoregulate very well, so they can die of exposure if they're walking through dew-soaked grass. Those bunch-type grasses, those native grasses, are clumped, and they provide little channels and corridors between the clumps of grass. And the forbs are basically supporting the insects, both in variety and quantity, and that's the fuel that drives the engine on that poult. That's what makes it grow fast. The quicker they fly, the fewer that die. So if they've got access to lots of insects, they're flying in a week, a little over a week. If they're not getting access to the right amount of insects, it might be 2 weeks or longer before they're flighted. The quicker they fly, the fewer that die. Once they can fly up into a tree at night, they've got the same mortality rates as the adults.
What can landowners and farmers do to help ensure a healthy future for our turkey populations?
Well, again, there's some folks, with the decline being where it's at, they're wanting regulations changes, they're wanting predator bounties, they're wanting all these things that someone else has to do, and those things really aren't going to help. It's providing that quality habitat. One of the things that has changed is we've lost over 700,000 acres of CRP, most in North Missouri, and that's where the most significant decline is. That's, basically that program created brood range, and when commodity prices went up, that stuff went back into corn and beans is not turkey habitat.
We could take highly erodible sites like this to do Horizon 2 with no problem.
Frank Oberle is a modern-day Renaissance man. He's a world-class photographer turned prairie sage. By close friends and many admirers, Frank's called the Godfather of Prairie. The name fits because he's built a family of prairie savants, including Rudy Raceline and Steve Mowry. Today, he's training the next generation of prairie advocates, including myself.
Frank, you were part of establishing this prairie. What's the history of this beautiful piece of land?
The Prairie Foundation, we received 600 acres from Premium Standard Farm to do a prairie project here. It was Steve and I who initiated this thing and worked out the agreements. We partnered up with Fish and Wildlife and MDC to help validate what we wanted to do. Prairie here, it's a diverse landscape. Well, we need those blooms for, the insects to come and be a part of that. Then, of course, you have the other pollinators that come and visit, but all of those are very important to the rarest bird category in North America, and that's your grassland birds. They all come here to eat the insects. That's their main diet. You have your bobolinks, your upland sandpipers, of course your quail and your wild turkeys. They have to have lots of insects.
Prescribed fire is a timeless technique that has been employed since the days of the Osage to manage grasslands. The native people knew fire would result in lush grasses to draw in the vast herds of bison. Fire is used today to unlock native seeds in the soil bank and to generate regrowth of established vegetation.
What do you expect the benefits to be for this land after the burn?
Some of the unwanted species, like if there's any fescue, although I don't see very much fescue in here, it would set that back because fescue doesn't like to be burnt this time.
And how does that benefit wildlife?
The plants that are going to regrow are going to regrow in such a way that they're going to have lots of light. They're not going to grow up in the shade. A lot of times when plants grow up in the shade, they go in what I call as a semi-dormancy. They'll make these certain leaves, but since they're not getting the sunshine they need, a full sunshine, they'll just be vegetative, maybe a foot and a half. It won't set blooms. Well, we need those blooms for the pollen, and we need those blooms for, the insects to come and be a part of that.
Steve Mowry is a Kansas City attorney who finds solace from the city on his farm in North Missouri. Steve is dedicated to conservation and is a leader amongst his peers in numerous organizations, including the Missouri Prairie Foundation. Steve puts his money where his mouth is and implements progressive conservation practices on his own land. The results speak for themselves.
Let's talk about this farm that we're on. How did you come to own such a beautiful piece of property?
Persistence, luck, I was invited to come up and hunt a farm in 1984 near Greencastle, and got to hunt there for 2 or 3 years, and found out that what an amazing turkey area this was. This was the epicenter for all turkey hunting in the mid to late 80s, early 90s. People from all over the country came here. You could drive down the roads and there would be call manufacturers just camped out.
Yeah, that's what you were saying, that they actually were just selling
Just
roadside
at the roadside, they would sell
handmade
calls.
calls.
They took over a school. There was a group called the Unionville Sportsman's Club that took over a school up in Unionville, and they leased several thousand acres, and turkey hunters, TV turkey hunters from all over the country would come here. And I mean, I met Rob Keck one time. He was listening to turkeys on our farm right at the edge of the fence one time. There's a lot of reasons, I guess, but for whatever reason, the turkey story has been told a lot of times. You introduce turkeys into an area, and then they grow in population very quickly. They have real high poult survival for whatever reason. And maybe it's because the predators haven't caught up yet, or maybe it's just a natural thing that occurs when birds move into an area that doesn't have other turkeys. I don't know that it's fully understood, but I was able to come up at that golden era up here and see what it was, and that's the way I thought it would always be. Well, this is the standard. I don't remember exactly how I got led to him, but that's how I found Frank Oberle, because he was a grassland guy up here, and I reached out to him. He said, what I'd really like to understand is, what do I do for my farm? And by this time I'd bought a farm, to improve the grassland, because I think that's what I need for turkey nesting. And so he started bringing me into the whole world of prairie. The hunting is what brought me up here originally, and the farm crisis had occurred in the 80s, and the price of land was really low, even for then. I think it had dropped by 75%. And so there was a lot of land that could be bought up here for $220, $230, $250 an acre at the time. And that's the only way a kid like me went in partnership with other guys and was able to buy a farm. And then over the years, they wanted to get out of the partnership or whatever. I was able to buy them out and just keep adding to the farm.
I kept at it, and heard one gobble back up in here. And out from behind us came a would come down and they'd harvest the seed for several years.
What happened to them?
They just all died. We had a flood in here that lasted about a day. They just died.
Another aspect of your property that makes it so nice is how much effort you put into managing your forests. I know timber standard improvement is real important to you. Why is that?
We're living in a golden era right now of information about what it takes to improve habitat for wildlife. Turkeys are in decline across the country. There's some areas they're doing better than others, but across the southeast, turkeys are declining, and it really awakened us to, oh my gosh, what happens if our turkeys disappear like our quail disappeared? And maybe it's, what can we do before that happens, because we didn't do anything to interrupt that. And the quail, everybody owned bird dogs and everybody hunted quail, and now I used to say everybody's down to their last bird dog. Now nobody owns bird dogs.
That's what's so scary about this turkey population decline, is the fact that you have quail to look at as an example. 2 generations ago, they were like, well, it's getting worse, but it'll never go away. And now it's gone in certain places.
for May, that was a pretty vocal morning.
Yeah, for sure.
What did we have? How many gobblers? 3 or 4?
I don't know, because there were some distant ones too. I mean, it was just all up and down. But we had the 2 right across from us that were just all morning long.
And then the hen was right off to our right, and hen off to our left, and then one further down, and then one quite a ways back there. So I think we had 4 hens and 4 gobblers all strung out.
What's so interesting about them, though, is like how reflective it is of human behavior, because there were some hens that were just, pretty quiet. They were just barely, clucking and yelping. And then you had the ones that were just hammering, just going and going and going. It's like, all right, the loud one versus the quiet one.
Well, that one I almost thought, that almost sounds like a man with a turkey call.
You had them gobblers fired up, man.
Yeah.
They were tuned in this morning.
Throughout this episode, we've learned about the current state of the wild turkey and how critical healthy habitats are to their well-being. Steve is a great example of how time and effort combined result in better habitat for wildlife, which means the world is a better place for all life. As we continue our Horizon 2 journey, we'll dig into aspects of our natural and manufactured worlds. We'll look for ways in which they may work better together, and ultimately we'll discover methods in which we all, collectively, in rural towns and enormous cities, can leave this planet better than we found it.